Most people think money is the biggest factor in how well they age. It's not. How you use your money is what actually determines whether you stay independent or end up reacting to decisions you didn't want to make. Before we go any further, let me introduce myself because context matters. I'm Allison O'Shea, and I am the founder of Openly Aging. And my work is focused on helping people stay independent as they age. Not by avoiding aging, not by pretending nothing will change, but by understanding it and being strategic about it. I've spent decades watching how people age in real life, not in theory. And what I've learned is this: aging itself isn't the problem. The lack of strategy around aging is. So when we talk about money and aging, most people assume the conversation is about whether they'll have enough. That's usually where the anxiety shows up first. Will my money last? What if I live longer than I expect? What if something happens? But starting there actually puts you in the wrong mindset, because money by itself doesn't determine how well you age. How you use money does. Most people don't really have a financial strategy for aging. What they have is hope. They hope they'll stay healthy. They hope they won't need help. They hope they'll figure it out if something happens. And that's not because people are careless or irresponsible. It's because we were never taught how money and aging actually work together. For decades, the unspoken rule has been simple. Work hard, save your money, don't touch it unless there's an emergency, and deal with aging later. Money becomes something you guard, something you preserve, something you're afraid to mess up. The problem is that aging doesn't show up with a warning label that says, "This is the emergency." It shows up very quietly. And I want you to really think about this for a moment. When was the last time you noticed something felt a little harder than it used to? Not impossible, just harder. Maybe the house feels more tiring to manage. Maybe driving at night doesn't feel as comfortable. Maybe you're more cautious on stairs. Maybe your energy doesn't stretch as far as it once did. And maybe your social calendar has thinned out. Not dramatically, just slowly. None of that feels like a crisis. So people wait. They wait to spend money. They wait to ask questions, and they wait to think strategically. And while they're waiting, aging keeps happening. And then one day something changes. A fall, a hospitalization, a diagnosis, a moment where everyone suddenly realizes we should have talked about this sooner. At that point, money stops being a tool and starts being a reaction. And people often respond by saying, but hospital stays and rehab are covered by insurance. And yes, doctor's appointments, hospital stays, and short-term rehab are typically covered by Medicare. That part is true. What insurance doesn't cover is everything that happens around those events. It doesn't cover your adult children dropping everything in their lives to come help you, rearranging work, canceling trips, managing stress they weren't prepared for. It doesn't cover the emotional weight of suddenly feeling vulnerable in ways you never intended. It doesn't cover rushed decisions made when everyone is overwhelmed and exhausted. And it doesn't cover the loss of control that happens when strategy is missing and time is short. Those costs don't always show up on a bill, but they are very real. They affect your independence, they affect your dignity, and they affect your relationships. And once you're reacting instead of thinking strategically, your options narrow very quickly. Here's something I've learned from watching thousands of aging journeys firsthand. Ignoring aging does not save money. It increases the odds that money will be spent in ways you didn't choose. Waiting doesn't preserve assets. It quietly puts them at risk. Because when independence starts to slip without support in place, the alternatives tend to look the same. Help shows up fast, decisions get made under pressure, and money gets spent reactively instead of intentionally. That's why I encourage people to change the question they're asking. Instead of asking, how long will my money last? Ask, what do I want my money to support as I age? And I want you to pause here and really think about this. What do you love about your life right now? Not what you should love, not what sounds good. What do you actually love? Is it your home, your neighborhood, your routines, your independence, your privacy, your social life, being useful, feeling in control of your days? If your money isn't being used, at least in part, to protect those things, then it's not really supporting your life. Now let's go a layer deeper. What parts of your day take the most energy right now? Not the things you enjoy, the things that quietly drain you. Is it managing the house, cooking every meal, driving everywhere, keeping up with paperwork, yard work, managing appointments? Spending money to reduce energy drain is often one of the smartest independence strategies there is. Another question people rarely ask themselves is this: how safe is your living environment? Honestly. Not perfect, not worst case scenario, just honestly. How are the stairs, the lighting, the bathrooms, the entryways, the laundry? Small investments here often prevent very expensive consequences later. And here's one that really matters. If something changed suddenly, not worst case, just realistically, who would step in? Who would notice first? Who would help? Who would advocate for you? Who would make sure your wishes were respected? If the answer is, I'm not really sure, that's not failure. That's information. And if this way of thinking feels helpful, if it feels like someone is finally talking about aging without fear or urgency, make sure you subscribe to this channel. This is exactly what I do here. I help people understand aging early, calmly, and strategically, so decisions don't get made for them later. Now, another thing people care deeply about is protecting relationships. For some, that means not putting their kids in the position of having to drop everything or make hard decisions under pressure. They don't want their children to become crisis managers. And for those aging solo, it means not putting their support system, friends, neighbors, professionals, or extended family at odds with each other or just in a tricky situation because strategy was delayed. When things aren't clear, people disagree. When decisions are rushed, relationships are strained. Money, when used intentionally, can prevent all of that. Now let's talk about areas people often assume will just work out. Medicare generally covers doctor's appointments, hospital stays, and short-term rehab. It does not cover long-term care. Medicaid, on the other hand, can be used for long-term care in a nursing home, but it is needs-based. That means it looks closely at income and assets. This is where many people get caught off guard. They assume that if they'll ever need it, they'll qualify. Then they find out they make just a little too much, or they have assets they didn't realize counted, or they waited too long to think strategically. I've seen people miss eligibility by Medicaid by $20. Another area that's often completely overlooked is veterans benefits. If you or your spouse served, even if it was years ago, even if you're not sure if it counts, it's worth understanding what may be available. One of the most significant programs is called Aid in Attendance through the Department of Veterans Affairs. Aid in Attendance can help pay for support like in-home assistance or services that allow you to stay independent longer. And you don't need to be living in a nursing home to qualify. In fact, this benefit is often most powerful when it's used earlier, before things feel urgent. Many families never explore this option because they assume they won't qualify or they don't know it exists. By the time they ask, opportunities have already been missed. There are also ways to protect assets while still being strategic about the possibility of Medicaid. This isn't about hiding money, it's about understanding the rules. This is where talking with an estate planning attorney becomes incredibly important. Not because something is wrong, but because they understand how assets, timing, and eligibility rules work together. A good estate planning attorney can help you understand what counts, what doesn't, and what strategies may allow you to preserve assets, whether that's for a spouse, to pass assets down intentionally, or to use resources in ways that support your quality of life while still positioning you to be eligible sooner if care is ever needed. Timing matters. These strategies only work when they're explored before a crisis. Doing nothing is still a strategy. It just leaves fewer options on the table. So when people ask me what's the most affordable way to age, my answer is always the same: staying independent. Not because independence is free, but because reaction is expensive, financially, emotionally, and rationally. Money works best when it's used intentionally to support the life you love, to protect your choices, and to reduce stress for everyone involved. You don't need all the answers today. You just need to stop avoiding strategy, because the sooner you engage with it, the more options you'll have and the fewer expensive surprises you'll face later. If all of this resonates with you, please subscribe to Openly Aging. You can also get on my free newsletter. The link will be in the description, and I'll talk to you all soon.